So joining me today is Laura Patterson, and this is kind of a strange situation. We are together here electronically, even though we live in the same small west side of Austin neighborhood, and actually probably about 10 houses apart. I haven't counted, but it's not very far at all. And another sort of strange part of the story is that we knew each other slightly because we both walked our dogs, but we did not realize that we shared an interest in marketing and writing until we were connected by a mutual acquaintance across the planet in India. And that would be Gautam Mahajan, who is the creator of the Value Creation Institute, I believe it's called. So it's so bizarre to discover that, oh, hey, this person's in Austin. Oh, wait, that's my neighbor. So this is actually crazy. And I wish we could be doing this in person, but today we are in the sort of height of the COVID pandemic here in Texas. Every day this week, we have set new high counts for cases, and today is no exception. It's the highest case count ever. So for the moment, we will play it safe and do it electronically. So welcome to the show, Laura. And why don't you briefly explain who you are and what you do?
Well, hello, neighbor. And thank you. And thank you for having me be a part of your podcast. As Roger mentioned, we share a passion for marketing and for helping companies grow. I think that's the most important thing about what we share in common, is that we're both committed and passionate about enabling our customers and to grow and to leverage marketing to do that. And so I've been in the world of marketing, sales, and what you would call customer success today. I think that's what the current label, for a very long time, for decades. And I am excited to be able to leverage everything I've learned over these decades on behalf of our customers. And so that's really what we do. So I've spent my career predominantly in the B2B world, 14 years of my career in semiconductors, and the rest of it in either manufacturing, healthcare, or technology. And 21 years ago, right now, 21 years ago, helped found VisionEdge Marketing. And really, we were kind of early to the game, Roger. I mean, we were all about being a customer-centric, data-driven organization to help companies use process, measurement, and analytics in order to acquire more customers, create more customer value, to accelerate growth and improve performance. And that's what we do.
Great. 21 years ago, that must have been a rather novel concept. Today, it sounds like a pretty normal thing to do, but then you're probably talking a different language. And yeah, I want to congratulate you, Laura, on your new book, which is this. It is Fast Track Your Business. And it actually features a short blurb for me in the front because I actually read it and recommended it. So it isn't often that I get to have a book that I have recommended have the author of that book on with me. So that's really great to have you here today, Laura.
Thank you. And I really appreciated your comments, because not only did Roger read it, but he actually provided feedback, which is really nice. When you know someone that you admire and whose expertise you trust gives you some feedback to help make your end product better. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, sometimes I just can't help myself, Laura. So the focus of the book is on customer centricity and driving growth that way. But at the very beginning, you talk about marketing with a capital M and why that's an important distinction, which seemed to be kind of sort of an odd little quirky thing to start with. Why does marketing deserve a capital M?
Okay. It's a good question. And anyone who gets a chance to read the book will read how we came to have this conversation internally within our company, because we had gone back and forth about whether it should be capitalized. And I have a couple of people on the team who are sticklers for grammar and just other things that come to style. And every time I would send something to them to review, and it had a capital M, they would send it back to me with fixing it and making it a small m. And finally I said, we need to have a conversation about why I keep capitalizing M. And of course, in the book, we talk about a little bit about that. And the question being, people thought we were kind of nuts when we had this conversation. But the point I was trying to make is that organizations that depend on marketing to serve as a strategic player and to drive growth and to bring what we call and what Dr. Ram Shamran calls upstream marketing into play, deserve to be capitalized, because what they are doing is really moving the company forward towards achieving its growth goals. It's creating value for customers, right? That's really what marketing should be doing. And that when marketing is very tactically oriented and you're executing the things that marketing does, then that should be, a small m. And so that was sort of the conversation. And the way we started having this conversation actually was, is it sales, the sales organization, a capital S? Sure it is. But when you talk about sales, the function, the doing part, this thing is on sale, clearly that is a small s. So we began to have this conversation internally, and it turned into quite a discussion, something that warranted far more than coffee. And ultimately we settled on some guidelines for when we capitalize the M in marketing.
Right. Well, good. And I think that all of our audience members who are in marketing can create their own personal style sheets now in their organizations to be sure that the marketing as a function gets the respect it deserves. Customer centricity is something that is in everybody's mission statement these days in some form or other, but it doesn't seem like many businesses capitalize on that, or actually execute on that, I should say. Why is that, Laura? Why does everybody say they're customer centric, but really a relatively small number of companies actually seem to put the customer first?
I think that's true. I want to back up for just a moment, though, because
Sure.
I think that you're asking a really important question, and led to one of the key things that this book is about. So this book takes a framework that we have been using for 20-something years. And just a quick story about how this book came into fruition. I think that will explain something and come back to your question. So it's called The Circle Attraction. And it is, each chapter in this book, as you know, Roger, takes people through the nodes on the circle and talks a little bit about the axis that you need to have in place in order to make the wheel of growth turn. And many, many years ago, one of the CMOs that we still work with today, he's on his third or fourth company since we've started working together. We presented this circle of attraction to him and he thought it was very valuable, and he used it as a guideline. And the circle of attraction starts with customer insights. And the idea being that how can you make decisions about how you're going to grow your business if you don't understand your customers and your market? Right? So the notion of if we build it, they will come, which I'm very familiar with, having been in the semiconductor industry, it can work, and we can have examples of that. But the companies that sustain themselves and really truly grow and are still, end up being here and manifesting themselves into key players, recognize that the customer has to be the critical beginning point for long-term and sustainable growth. If you want to grow organically, that is, if you want to grow organically. And so, as I've told this story before, over the years as I worked with John, and we used the circle of attraction with his companies, a few years ago, when I was in a meeting with him for his growth summit for his latest company that he had joined, and asked me to come once again to share the circle of attraction, he said to me, when are you ever going to put that into a book? And hence, that was actually, to give John credit, the seeds of this book was finally sitting down and really thinking through how we could share the circle of attraction with others and really talk about where customer fits into the conversation. And I can tell you right away whether a company is customer-centric or not. So coming back full circle to your question, just when they begin to tell me what their company is going to do in order to achieve success, what are the bets they're placing? The moment they start telling me what those things are and they don't include any mention of customers, I realize they probably are not customer-centric.
What are some incorrect things, or at least non-customer things, that people have explained to you as what they're going to do to make things better?
Oh, we have a brand new product that's going to completely overtake the market, and we're bringing that out next year, and we're just we want to build brand awareness around this product, right? I haven't heard one thing about which customers, what markets, why they would want to buy it, what problem it's actually solving. They just have a cool idea. Or, we have a brand new service. We want to go, get all of our customers to upgrade to this new service or to add on this new service. Again, very little idea about, which customers or why these particular customers would benefit or from this particular new service. So those are just examples, right? Increase awareness, create demand, but really no indication of where they're going to get that from or from whom.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Now it's marketing's job to go to figure out who's going to use this thing and sell it to them. So yeah, I think that sort of product and feature focus is pretty common. And sometimes it makes sense if the new features are geared towards a specific customer need, but all too often they're, hey, we can do this. Wow, we've got the technology to do this. Or one of our people found this really cool thing we could do, and they're often running with it before determining if there's really any demand. I think one of the failings that I see too is that sort of lip service to customer focus or customer centricity, but at the end of the day, it's all about trying to support the share price. And this would be true particularly in larger public companies that are really monitored on a monthly and quarterly basis to see how they're doing. They can get so focused on those things that those investments in customer experience just don't get made. I mean, they say, yeah, this is super important, but we don't have the money this quarter or this fiscal even, we'll do that next year. And
I think you're right. And a few years ago, you might know Dr. Ralph Oliva, who it will soon be retiring from Penn State. And I've known him for a very long time. He was at Texas Instruments in the days that I was at Motorola. So we've known one another a long time. We wrote an article together on Wall Street versus Main Street, right? And that customer-centric companies are really thinking about their customers in doing the right thing by those customers. And you might remember that book that came out in the 90s called Moments of Truth. Mm-hmm. Is that ringing a bell? It's an exceptional book. I think it was written by the guy that was at the time the CEO of Scandinavian Airlines. And the idea being that these moments of truth are really indications of just how committed your company is to the customer, coming through for the customer, and how you do or don't empower your employees to make decisions that are under the lens of, is it the right thing to do for the customer? So if, I was sort of raised inside Motorola that do the right thing for the customer. You never get fired for doing the right thing for the customer, right? So I think that that's really something important. And here we all are right now in really trying times. And we have customers who are facing trying times, and their customers are facing trying times. And we're all worried, I'm sure, about whether we're going to survive financially in this marketplace. And so we can get worried about that, or we can say, let's just take care of each other and let's take care of our customers. And then those things will come to pass when they come to pass, right? But if you do the right thing, you can kind of sleep at night knowing that you're taking care of your customers. And I think that's right now, I don't know how many emails you get from people who are all saying how much they're taking care of their customer, but it's someone you hadn't heard from for like 3 years. So, right?
It's ironic that the author you cited is from an airline, because lately the airlines have gotten, rightly so, I think, a huge amount of bad press because they've needed a bailout from the government after years of record profits. When they were not improving customer experience, they were packing ever more customers into smaller spaces on airplanes. They weren't really taking great care of their employees. And then suddenly, despite all those years of record profits, they had no money when they needed it, or not enough money. And to me, that's a great example of how businesses who say they're all about the customer and all about their people really aren't.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we can probably cite many industries that are in that boat right now, right? That have.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I think airlines in particular, they feel like they're they are to some degree in direct competition with each other. So nobody can sort of break from the pack and say, okay, we're going to offer a better customer experience. It may cost a few dollars more, but it's going to be measurably better. And that just has not been a viable strategy, it seems, for whatever reason.
So we wrote an interesting article, a couple that you may have
players
seen.
have tried it without all that much success.
Yes, and I was going to say we wrote an interesting article very recently called "Are You Setting Yourself Up to Become a Commodity?" And I think that that customer experience, true customer experience today is a huge differentiator. And if you don't really figure out how to do that recipe right, you are on your way to becoming a commodity. And in the article, or maybe it's a podcast actually that we did on our site, I talk about how what happens. I use the old-fashioned gas station. So Roger, you and I can probably remember old-fashioned gas stations. Yeah. Right, where you pulled in and someone actually filled your tank for you.
Yeah, we're dating ourselves there, Laura.
I apologize.
You saw it in movies.
I saw it in a movie. Oh, I love that. Thank you for that. That will help me out. The point I'm trying to make is, look what happened, right? Once the customer experience went away, service stations became a commodity. It didn't really matter which one you went to. You just started looking at which one had the best price and was the most convenient to pull into and had, open pumps, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at one point in your book, Laura, you've got 23 questions to try and determine an appropriate sort of granular strategy and for growth. We don't have time to go through all 23, but what are maybe a couple of those questions that you've found have most often been successful in teasing out a good strategy? Or is it just so totally dependent on the situation that none of them pop out?
No, that's a great question. And thanks for bringing that up. So one of the things in this book we really wanted to do was give people things they could actually use. I hail from the Midwest. I'm from Missouri, the show me state. But being from the Midwest, we're really very practical people, right? So I wanted to write a book that gave really things people could put into play, not just lofty ideas and concepts, but something that people could actually do. And so in the book, and also for those people who, as you know, Roger, who buy the book, we even have a free bonus item people can download from our website that will help them assess just how ready they are to embark on this journey of organic growth. But to your point, thinking about the questions, we've used this assessment for many, many years to help do a couple of things. I want to set that up. One is it kind of is eye-opening for the company to go through this process and have this conversation internally and talk about how they each scored their company on these questions. And it's kind of interesting to see where there are huge gaps in agreement or disagreement, so to speak. And that creates a lot of internal conversation. It also gives us a
So sometimes a specific question isn't so much the thing as the different way different people answer it. That gives you some clues as to maybe why things aren't meshing as well as they could be.
Yes, and the other thing is it gives us an idea, right? It gives us an idea of where they think they are and why they think that. So that even if we never get a chance to talk to anybody about their assessment, just this assessment for an internal conversation can be really helpful. But I wanted to point out that this is on, like, I was remembering around page 50. It's actually page 52. And I really think, again, most of these questions will give you an understanding of whether or not you're paying attention to your customers, right? Are you in tune with your market? Are you in tune with your customers? And this is the beginning place, right? So like the very first question asks you, what's changing in your market? What's changing in your customer preferences? And you'd be surprised at how few people have been thinking about that. So I think that's a really, really important question. And here we all are, again, in this very unusual circumstance. And I hope it's one that will not last a whole lot longer. But certainly things have changed a lot in the last 3 months. And how people are going to do business going forward has probably changed too. preferences are going to change. Preferences about whether or not, just a simple thing, whether customers are going to want to come to your factory for a tour or not, right? Or meet or not, or show up for, come to a major conference versus just sign up and join a virtual roundtable. I mean, there's lots of things that are that. And then I think the next question really is understanding where your competitive advantage is. Because when we talk with a lot of customers, they usually, in the B2B space, I'm talking B2B now, because that's really my experience, is they want to talk about the features of their product, right? Here's the 10 cool things about our product, or here's the 5 things that make our product different from competitor X's product, right? Or here's the 3 things that differentiate our company's services, professional services, right? Or whatever. And I'm sure you can relate to these, right?
Well, sure. That's, people love to talk about their product because they created that product. It's wonderful. It's awesome. It's better than everyone else's. So
it's their baby.
It's like talking about your child's great successes or something, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right for the customer.
Exactly. So I think that's another indication. Can they really talk about their competitive advantage? What really is their differentiator? What really is the value that they're bringing to the market and to their customers? And then I think the third kind of question that I feel is really important is strategy. So one of the things that we see happen a lot is people have, here's what we're going to go do. And they have a list of things they're going to go do, right? Whatever it is, we're going to do 3 of these, 4 of these, and 10 of these, whatever these might be. 3 new pieces of content, 1 new white paper, 1 infographic, and a new blog, 4 new videos with customers, and 2 virtual roundtables, and a partridge in a pear tree, right? And so when we step back and say to them, well, what's your strategy? That's really, again, a key place. So I think those 3 things. Do you really understand what's going on in your market? Are you on top of the pulse of the market and your customers? Do you really have a handle on how you differentiate yourself from your competition, and what is the real value proposition you're bringing to the table, and what's your strategy? I think that's sort of where I would say if you needed to concentrate on the questions.
Well, yeah, and I think just the way somebody talks about something, for instance, if they say, well, our product is great because it's 25% more powerful, then maybe that's great. But if they say our product is great because it's higher power, lets customers get the job done in a quarter of the time or something like that, then they're expressing what the benefit is. They're not just focused on their feature, which may be a great feature, but on what the customer is using that for, how they're benefiting from it. Marketers often kind of overlook price as a strategy. And in some cases, that's because markets tend to set prices, at least certain markets do, in commodities that have limited flexibility. But talk a little bit about pricing and how that might figure into analyzing or developing a growth strategy.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too. In the earlier days of marketing, price was one of the key P's, right? Along with positioning and many other examples, a place, which today is now channel. So lots of different ways that people now talk about P's and C's. I've seen so many different variations on that theme. But to your point, marketing should be very involved in understanding what is the right pricing structure and pricing strategy. Oftentimes that's not what's happening. Pricing is set by a group outside of marketing, because marketing isn't really a marketing organization. It's a brand organization, or it's a demand gen organization, or it's a Marcom organization. And so price obviously wouldn't be incorporated into that function. But if you're truly a marketing organization, back to marketing with a capital M, and you are driving the strategic direction of the company. You're a key member of this, of defining the strategy and bringing that to fruition, bringing that to life. Then obviously price has to be a part of that conversation. And there are all different ways to look at price, as you and I both know. Where your product is in its competitive set and where it is in the adoption curve has a huge implication to the price. And that's something that a lot of people, when we talk with them and I say, well, how did you derive that price? well, we added up what all the costs are and we stuck some, how much profit we want to make on it. Great, but what is the competitive marketplace going to be? And can you articulate value for that in exchange for that price? So they haven't really thought about those questions, right? Are you pricing based on value? Are you pricing because you're the only ones with it and into the market first, and you maybe have a 3-month lead time before you see some competition, or you're the last one into the market, but you have something really unique. But what could you do with that? So to your point, a lot of people are not having a conversation about how price is part of their strategy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in some cases, the price might be too low. It could be that you could actually earn higher margins and the customers would still be happy with the product. Years ago, I worked for an industrial company that a different part of the company made products that were involved in abrasive handling. So these things wore out pretty quickly because they were constantly being pummeled by abrasives, and they were constantly trying to come up with stuff that would last longer because it took customers time and money to change these things out. They had to shut down their equipment, replace the parts, and then put it back into service. So they had I thought, a rather brilliant value pricing strategy. If a part lasted twice as long, they charged twice as much for it and said, hey, look at the labor you're going to save. And it was actually very sensible and was pretty much unrelated to cost because the customer didn't really care what the product cost to make. It was what kind of value it could deliver for them. Now, there aren't too many situations that are quite that clear cut, but to me, that was always just a good example of how a very sort of logical customer-focused pricing strategy could work. And it worked well for both parties. The customers benefited from savings, and the company often probably earned a significantly higher margin than had they just said, okay, well, we'll put our usual markup on this and charge whatever for it. So that made a lot of sense.
No, that's a perfect example, right? That's a really good example of why it would make sense to have a product that's priced different from the rest of the market, because you have a product that is really different from the rest of the market.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So Laura, how would you balance, we've mentioned not just customers, but employees. But these days we've got companies that are being pulled in sort of multiple directions. They're being told to be customer-centric. They're being told to be employee-centric. And then, of course, you've got to deliver value for the shareholders. How do you tie employee centricity into this process?
Okay, I think that's a really good question. So here's a very simple answer. When you have unhappy employees, they don't do a good job. When they don't do a good job, or their unhappiness permeates what they're doing, then it seeps into the relationships with customers, and then that affects the customer experience, which then will affect the relationship you have long-term with your customers, right? Because who is your front line? Who are your best brand ambassadors? They are your employees, right? So if you think of employees as your ambassadors to the market, then you would certainly want to make sure that your ambassadors are feeling positive about what they are supposedly advocating, right? Because they're your first advocates. And I think if companies would remember that every single employee is an advocate for your company, for your brand, for your product. So if they're not happy and they're not engaged, they are not empowered, if they have strong negative sentiment towards the company as opposed to strong positive sentiment towards the company, that's going to seep into everything they touch. And that will include those moments of truth with customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had Tom Peters on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he threw out a quote from, I think it was John DeJulius, that your customers will never be happier than your employees. And that's generally true. You can maintain that for some period of time, I think, but in the long run, that's true. We're seeing a little bit of that at Amazon right now, where customers absolutely love Amazon because their service is just so robotically perfect, it seems. If they say it's in stock, it's always in stock. If they say it's going to be there Tuesday, it's always there Tuesday. And so, what's not to like? And their prices are competitive. But we're seeing with the pandemic crisis, a little bit of fraying of that perception that they're a good employer. You've got some walkouts and protests and such, and this doesn't seem to be super widespread, but you just wonder, how long you can maintain a differential there. And I think the answer is maybe not for too long, unless you can get to the point where your company's entirely run by robots and you've got robot warehouses and that load packages onto drones, and in which case you can get away with it maybe.
So I think you're bringing up a really good point. We're kind of getting on a tangent, and I'll pull us back in just a moment. I'm going to use the word agreement or contract in a very loose metaphor way. Obviously, there are not real contracts, legal contracts between employees and employers. I mean, there may be in some instances, but in most cases, and as we know here in Texas, this is a right to work state, right? But there needs to be a clear understanding of what the agreement and expectations are. And so when an employer sets out the expectations and you as an employee accept the job, you have entered into an arrangement, into an agreement. So as long as the employer is living up to their end of the agreement, I believe that employees need to live up to their end of the agreement. And I think that in sometimes, I can't speak to Amazon, I don't know enough about what's going on. We may have people feeling that, well, I want to change the agreement, right? I want to change the agreement, but that wasn't the agreement. So I think that's important. I think it's both sides. Both sides need to remember what they put out there as the conditions, rules of engagement, or the agreement for the relationship, whatever you want to call that. Now, I'm not an HR professional by any means, so I want to be really careful to go down this path because I am way away from what it is I know. But seems to me that some of the things that are going on right now are interesting ripples that maybe are more than just an employer not fulfilling their agreement.
Right, and I think it's partly driven by the pandemic crisis that we're in the middle of, because that sort of changed whether an agreement was written or unwritten. The rules suddenly got changed for everybody.
Yes,
coming into work now might qualify you for hazardous duty pay, where a few weeks earlier that wasn't the case. And and Amazon is really, to their credit, they've done an awful lot by setting high wage scales for their people. Even their frontline hourly people, the lowest paid people in the company, do reasonably well compared to other firms. They have great education benefits in many cases, where people can take classes and get them paid for. So I mean, they do a lot of good, but the virus thing just upset things, where what people's expectations were and what going to work meant has changed. So I don't want to take up your whole afternoon here, Laura. I will remind everyone that we are talking to Laura Patterson, author of the book, Fast Track Your Business. And Laura, how can people find you and your ideas?
Well, thank you for asking that. And thank you again, Roger, for having me. So it's VisionEdgeMarketing.com is the website. They can always reach out to me by email at Laura, L-A-U-R-A-P for Patterson at VisionEdgeMarketing.com. I'm pretty good and open about accepting LinkedIn invites, so I always welcome people to connect with me there. And we would love to hear from anyone and be happy to answer questions that people might have. And I hope people will pick up a copy of the book and find it helpful.
Great. Well, Laura, thanks for being on the show. It's been a lot of fun. We will link to those places on the show notes page, by the way, at rogerdooley.com/podcast. So Laura, thanks a lot. It's been fun.
It has been fun. Thanks, Roger. See you on the walk.